Hello everyone, I'm back. All right, for part two of this mixed haul. I got through the first stuff. Now I got a whole bunch more books and films to go through with you, and let's see how long this will take. Hopefully it'll be as short as possible. But um, if my track record is indicative of this video, then it's gonna be a little bit of time. So for some reason I have difficulty making short videos now. That's like a faux pas for the modern watcher of social media. They want everything quick and fast, right? So you're supposed to make your videos like short, but fuck it, I'm gonna make my videos however long it takes, right? All right. So um, let's see how long this one this one is, right? All right. So let's do some books first. All right. So up first is the Greek Tragedies, Volume 1, the Greek Tragedies, Volume 2, and the Greek Tragedies Volume 3. So I think there's 3 volumes in this. Is there a fourth one? I don't think there's a fourth one. I think it's 3 volumes is the complete Greek Tragedies set from the University of Chicago Press. Now I spoke about, who was it, Sophocles? Was it Sophocles? Yeah, Sophocles in part 1 of this video of his 3 Theban plays. But this is basically most of the plays that you'll want to read in these 3 volumes. Of all the Greek tragedies. Now, there's comedies and dramas and things like that as well. Aristophanes is famous for a lot of his comedies that you should read as well from ancient Greece. But these are a good 3 volumes set to get an idea of all the great ancient tragedies. So basically, volume 1 has Aeschylus. Haha, I'm remembering his name now. If I say Aeschylus, does that sound like Aeschylus to you? All right, I think that's how you say it, is Aeschylus, right? So you have 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 of Aeschylus's plays. Sophocles, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of Sophocles' plays, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of Euripides' plays. So basically, those are the 3 Greek tragedy. Yeah, man, I need a university education if we're going to speak about this stuff. What do you think? Anyways, no. So those are the 3 main playwrights in ancient Greece that wrote tragedies. Okay, they are Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, and their major plays are all in this 3-volume set. So if you want to look for something to read all the plays, all the tragedies of ancient Greece, this 3-volume set put out by Chicago University Press. They're not new, so you should be able to find them pretty good. This one's from 1960, so they've been around for a while. This one, 1960, so it looks like these were put out in 1960. So you should be able to find them for a reasonable cost. Now I picked them up because I'll probably sell the 3 for $15, and I picked them up for maybe $5. So I should make a bit of money off of that so that I can buy some more videos and stuff like that. All right, so next up is Douglas Adams and Terry Jones' book, Starship Titanic. All right, and basically Douglas Adams kind of wrote what would you call that, the outline for this, and then Terry Jones wrote the actual book. So Terry Jones wrote this book, and it's basically about a cruise ship, but it's a spaceship, and then it's launched, and then disappears a few seconds after being launched, and ends up in the house of a person on Earth. So and then it goes on from there. So it's quite funny. As you know, Douglas Adams and Terry Jones are quite humorous. Douglas Adams being the Douglas Adams of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Dirk Gently's books and all that, right? So it's pretty funny. So I'm assuming it's pretty funny because I haven't read it. I picked it up because he's a popular writer. This should be easy to resell, right? So all right. So next up is a Penguin classic, right? and it's Menander, Plays and Fragments. Now, Menander was a Greek playwright from 200, late 200 BC, early 300s to the late 200s BC. So you got to go backwards when you go BC, right? So he was born in the 300s and died like in the 290s BC. Anyway, so these are his plays and fragments. Fragments because most of the stuff that he wrote was on papyrus, obviously, because it's, pre-Christ, right? So that's how people wrote. And they found a bunch of his writings, and some of them were complete and some of them weren't. The ones that are complete are here in his plays. He wrote comedies, so if you like comedic plays, you will enjoy Menander and Fragments. So I'm not sure how interesting the fragments would be. You would probably want the whole play rather than just fragments from it. But basically, there was enough of his writings that the Penguin Classics put it in their put a volume in their library for it. So if you ever find Menander and you like comedic plays, you probably enjoy it. Okay, so next up is a Penguin Modern Classic, one of the earlier versions of the Modern Classics. They're not like light blue or light green; they're orange. And it's T.E. Lawrence's Seven Pillars of Wisdom. This is basically the book that they used to base the movie Lawrence of Arabia on it, because that's T.E. Lawrence, and it basically describes his adventures or participation in the revolt against the Turks, the Ottoman Empire at the time. I think it was the Ottoman Empire, right? So the revolt in Arabia against the Turks. Yeah. All right. So, and it's quite interesting. There he is there. All right. Kind of looks like Lawrence of Arabia in the film, right? So basically, it describes his participation in that, and it's the one of the greats of literature. So if you haven't read that, it would probably be interesting to read. All right, so next up is the Penguin Classics of Jane Austen's Mansfield Park. I have not read Mansfield Park. I had a little conversation with you previously about female writers or women writers, how I don't relate to them as well as male writers. Maybe it's a deficiency in me, I'm not sure, or maybe it's just the point of view of women and how they write. Women understand the writing easier than men do. I don't know. But Jane Austen is a person I haven't really picked up much. So I did read one of her books, but it wasn't Mansfield Park. And this one is supposed to be pretty good with, Fanny Price, and supposed to be pretty funny, and, got that biting humor to it, and which Austen is famous for. But I have not read it yet. All right. So that's Jane Austen's Mansfield Park. It's supposed to be a really good novel. All right. So what's up next? Okay. So next up is Che, a memoir by Fidel Castro. All right, so Che Guevara is basically, him and Castro took over Cuba, turned it into a socialist or a communist state, and then he went on. He's from Bolivia originally, I think, or he's from South America, anyways, originally. And then after everything was established in Cuba, he went on to Central America and started a revolution there as well. And then he ended up getting shot. So, but his life is quite interesting. If you have not read anything about Che Guevara, he's more than the T-shirt. The T-shirt with his image on it. You should pick up a book and read about him. His life is pretty interesting. All right, and this is Castro's view of Che Guevara, and there's various biographies that you can read about him as well. All right, so that's Che, memoir by Fidel Castro. All right, so next up is Sean O'Casey, 3 plays. So the plays are Juno and the Paycock, The Shadow of a Gunman, and The Plow and the Stars. And basically, Sean O'Casey was, he's part of Sinn Féin back in the early 1900s. That longing for Irish independence from England, and he fought for it. But mostly he was a laborer, and then he turned into a writer, and he wrote plays that reflect that reality. The Irish life during the Troubles and during that kind of thing. So famous for that. If you have not read it, and you want some interesting plays from that tragedy that is Ireland versus England. He's one of the big names of it. All right. So that's Sean O'Casey. And so next up is Gerald Durrell's The Corfu trilogy. Corfu is an island. I guess him and his family went to that island when he was a boy. He got into lots of adventures, fell in love with the flora and fauna and the animals of that area, and he basically reflected it in these three novels. So this is a three-novel set, all in one volume. All right, and I saw it on the shelf at the thrift store, and I go, I don't know a lot about that, but uh, it's put out by Penguin, and it's a trilogy. And usually, if you're going to put three books together, those three books are really good. So I picked it up and see if I could resell it. It's kind of like a blind buy for a resale. If you've read the Corfu trilogy or any of the three books in it, let me know in the comments. Tell me what you think. Is it worth reading? Should I read it before I sell it? What do you think? All right. Next up is The Three Pillars of Zen by Philip Kapleau. All right. The Zen practice of Zen Buddhism, that style of religion, if you want to call it a religion, is quite fascinating to the Western audience, to Western people. So anytime you can find a book on Zen, pick it up. You can resell it pretty easily. So that's what I did. I have not read a lot of books on Zen, but I have read a few. One of the greatest books I ever read was Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. If you have not, by Robert Prizig, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. If you haven't read that, read that. I don't know how much it has to do with Zen, but there is a Zen elements in it when he's working on his motorcycle. It's like calming to him. And anyways, that is a great book if you have not read it. But I have not read The Three Pillars of Zen. So next up is The Worldly Philosophers by Robert L. Heilbronner. All right. And basically the lives, times, and ideas of the great economic thinkers. All right. So basically it's an overview of the history of the philosophy of economics, right? So you have Smith, Marx, George, Keynes, Malthus, and John Stuart Mill, and kind of like a write-up on each one of those and what their economic thoughts are. So it's quite an interesting read. I've read all of these authors directly through their books, but not through this volume. But I picked it up to resell. Most of the books that I'm going to show you, I've either read and enjoy, but I'm picking them up to resell them, right? So, all right. So next up is Shigeru Mizuki's Onward Towards Our Noble Deaths. And basically Shigeru, or should I call him Mizuki? Mizuki was a soldier in the Imperial Japanese Army during World War II, and he was in New Guinea at the end of the war. On his last legs, the army there was on its last legs, and he ended up surviving it. And basically, he wrote a memoir of that time, um, being in the army because he's forced to go into the army, but he was a pacifist, and then all the horrors that he saw. But he survived it with a sense of humor as well, and you will see some of the humor that's in this. But if you have not read this book, I've only read the synopsis for it. It's quite intriguing to read about a Japanese soldier in the Second World War who was a pacifist, who didn't want to fight, didn't want to hurt other people, but was, conscripted into the Japanese army to go out and fight, and ends up in New Guinea and survives where mostly everybody else didn't, and then still has a bit of a sense of humor about it, right? And it's basically, you think it would be a written book, but it isn't. It's basically a comic. All right. So, and it's put on backwards. Basically, it's backwards, right? You're reading it backwards, it looks like. So it's interesting. Everything's backwards on it, right? So that's Shigeru Mizuki's Onward Towards Our Noble Deaths in an animated form. Well, not animated, cartoon form. All right, so we did that one. All right. So next up is Noam Chomsky's Problems of Knowledge and Freedom. And it's basically, this is his 70s thought. And he did a lecture, what was that, Cambridge? Where did he do it? yeah, at Cambridge on Bertrand Russell, and basically it turned into his. You basically get his ideology, the way that he thinks, and his criticism of the Vietnam War at the time, right? So it's quite interesting. If you haven't read Chomsky, read him. He's left leaning. So if you're a rightist, it's always good to know your quote unquote enemy. Although a leftist shouldn't be if you're in politics, left or right, everything should be about cooperation, not about you're my enemy and I'll do everything to defeat you kind of thing, right? It seems to be that way a lot in the United States. But go to Israel, not, and I'm not saying Israel is the greatest state in the world, let's put it that way. But if you go there, votes are counted in a different way. It's not, first past the post. It's like everybody votes for a different party and then they break up the seats into the percentages of what the parties got in votes. So usually it's a minority government and it's usually a coalition government in Israel. Whereas in Canada, the United States, it's first past the post, and then whoever wins wins, right? So a government with a mandate from a minority of people can actually rule, right? So, anyways, putting that aside, Chomsky was very critical of the Vietnam War, and he's very critical of politics in the United States just overall. So I mean, he's the guy that you should probably first go to if you want to learn about left-leaning ideology or thinking or politics or political thought. Chomsky is one of the big names in it. So if you want to learn what the left is like, right? All right. So that's Problems of Knowledge and Freedom from Noam Chomsky. All right. And still got more books. So the thing is when you're selling, like you're buying to sell, because when I first started doing this, I did it because I wanted to, I collect books. Originally, I collected CDs and comic books and baseball cards. And I always paid out of my own pocket for these things, right? Now, what I would do is I'd work at a comic book store or I'd work at a bookstore, use that labor to get the books and comics and things like that I wanted because, I never really had very much money growing up. So that's what I did. I traded the labor to get the books that I want or whatever, right? So then later on, it went from baseball cards to movies. So I learned a lot about baseball cards, baseball. I learned a lot about, books. I learned a lot about comic books. I learned a lot about this. And then I kind of move on and move on. And my latest adventure is movies, right? So I'm deep into movies, watching movies and collecting movies. But how do I finance that when I have a family to take care of, right? So there isn't a way to do it efficiently unless like I did with the comic book store or like I did with the bookstore, except I'm doing it on my own now where I buy stuff to resell. So I'll go out and look for stuff to collect for my own collection and I will pick up stuff that I have no intention of keeping, but I see that price is way too low on that because being in comic books, being in movies, being in CDs and all that, I have a pretty good idea of what's good and what's not good, what will sell and what won't sell, and how much stuff is worth compared to how much somebody's selling it for. And what I do is I look for the bargains, right? I look for the bargains and then I resell it at a market price of what it you know can sell for. And that difference between what I bought it for and what I've sold it for, that money is what I use, to fund my hobby. Otherwise, I wouldn't have enough money to pay for stuff I need to pay for my family, right? So that's what I do. So this book, for example, I'm probably not going to read, but I picked it up for $2. But I know I could probably sell this for maybe $6 to $8, right? So I went out and got it. I'm going to list it and I'm going to put it up and I'm going to take the pictures and everything for it. So it's not like I'm doing it for free, right? I'm actually putting labor in it. But that's the same thing when I was working in a bookstore. I would put the labor in to get the books that I want, right? So same principle really as you're trading labor for money, right? Anyway, so that's what I do, and books seem to sell a lot quicker than CDs or movies. All right. So I do sell movies, I do sell CDs, but the bulk of things that I sell are books because books seem to be the most popular thing to buy. People like to buy books and read books. They're not really huge into ebook readers. A small percentage of people read from an ebook reader or from their phone. Most of the time, when they're reading, they want to read an actual physical book to read, and that's what they'll do. And they'll buy it to do that, right? So that's why you'll see a lot of these thrift store hauls. There's a lot of books involved in them because I can find books that I can resell in order to finance my collecting, right? That's how you do it, and you end up having no debt because of it, or impinging on the income that you need to spend for other things that are way more important, right? So, all right. So next up is Aesop's Fables. All right, and basically Fables. Aesop is one of the big names. Hans Christian Andersen is another one, and probably the biggest is probably Grimm, the Grimm brothers Grimm. They're all big, and they're all fun to read to children. They have lessons in them, right? So the big ones for Aesop would be like the town mouse and the country mouse, the goose that laid the golden egg, the wolf in sheep's clothing, and there's hundreds of them. There's about 300 of them fables in this hardcover. All right, so I picked this up from a private sale, like I said, from a gentleman. I picked up maybe 20 books from that guy who was getting rid of for $1. I picked it up for $1. Now this one I could probably sell for like 8, so it's worth buying, right? Next up after that is The Prophet, which I just talked about. So I got another copy of it. So I got about three copies of this. This sells really well. So whenever I see it, I'll pick it up. So I picked it up for $1. And I can probably sell this for $8 to $10, right? So if you haven't read The Prophet, it's supposed to be mind blowing, but I read it and I'm going, okay, this is just common sense, right? So um, I couldn't figure out why people are so impressed with it. Next up after that is On the Shoulders of Giants by Stephen Hawking, edited with commentary by Stephen Hawking. All right, so this is basically a book, The Great Works of Physics and Astronomy. So there are people that really like to read about science, computer science or science in general, physics, chemistry, astronomy, that kind of thing. And whenever I come across uh, certain books, I will pick them up. Now they don't sell as well as literature books, let's put it that way. But this book I think will sell, so that's why I picked it up, and I got it for $1. I mean, I can probably sell this for like $15 to $20. Right? So, um, Stephen Jay Gould's "The Spread of Excellence from Plato to Darwin" is another intellectual book. People really like to read intellectual books from other intellectuals. All right, so that's why I picked this one up. I have not read it, so step after that is Schrodinger's Kittens and the Search for Reality, Solving the Quantum Mystery is another science book. So the person that I picked it up, they were selling their library, a wife and a husband. So it's interesting how you can see the different reading habits of men and women. Because they were separated into two shelves, she had hers and his. And his stuff was all full of science and stuff like this book, or this book, or this book, right? And most of the stuff on her side was mystery, you know, true crime, uh, mystery fiction, that kind of stuff, and a lot of female writers. So maybe I'm correct in the assumption that when women write, women get attracted to women writers more than male writers. They'll read women writers, and men will read men writers more than women writers. So, anyway, so this is about Schrodinger's kitten. Schrodinger's cat. Is that old, uh, experiment or whatever, where if you take a cat, you put it in a box, and you close the box, and you can't see the cat in the box. Is the cat in the box and not in the box at the same time? Anyways, it's a complicated thing. It's a simple premise, but then you think about it, and it gets more and more complicated as you break it down, right? So I have not read this. John Griven is one of the big names in science. So next up after that is Measuring Eternity: The Search for the Beginning of Time All right, so this is another science book, right? History. I picked up a lot of science books from that gentleman. And Anthony Burgess' A Clockwork Orange, one of the greatest films ever made by Stanley Kubrick. It came from this book, one of the greatest books ever, uh, dystopian books ever written. Clockwork Orange by Burgess. He actually creates a language for this book. He created a new language. It's like a bastardization of English and Russian slang. So um, it's quite interesting to learn. And some of the volumes will have a glossary at the back of the end, at the end of the book, in order so that you can. This one doesn't, but a lot of the A Clockwork Orange, some of the volume, some of the published books of it will have a glossary at the back, so that when you're reading a book like what's a debauchka or whatever. And next up is 100 Years of Solitude, which is basically Gabriel Garcia Marquez's greatest novel. All right, and it's basically one of Central America's, South America's greatest, Latin America's greatest novels. If you have not read it. It is an extremely good novel. All right. Next up is Margaret Atwood's Cat's Eye. All right, this is a volume of Margaret Atwood that I have not read, so I may read this before I sell it. I've read many of her novels. Her greatest novel is either The Handmaid's Tale or The Edible Woman. But so much of her books, you can't go wrong with any Margaret Atwood book. All right, and this is no exception. Picked it up to resell it though, so maybe I'll just read it before I resell it. After that is Entanglement: The Greatest Mysteries in Physics, another science book. So, like I said, this gentleman had a lot of science. He quite enjoyed reading about science, right? So, after that is E equals MC squared, a biography of the world's most famous equation by David Bodanis. All right. So basically, energy equals mass times, what is C2? Do you remember from science class? All right, so that another science book by him. All right, next up after that is Relativity, the Special and the General Theory by Albert Einstein. So, like I said, he really enjoys science. All right. And then after that is Heavenly Intrigue, Johann Kepler, Tycho Brahe, and the murder behind one of history's greatest scientific discoveries. A little bit of intrigue when it comes to science. All right. Then The Elegant Universe by Brian Greene. Are you seeing a theme here? Mostly science books, right? Then John Gribben's book, In Search of Schrodinger's Cat. All right. And then I came across this gentleman really liked to read Timothy Findley, so he had 5 of his novels. So The Last of the Crazy People, Stones, Pilgrim, Not Wanted on the Voyage, and Famous Last Words. Now, Findley is another one of Canada's greatest male writers, and I'm a bit embarrassed to say that I have not read anything by him. So I have not read his books. So, and last but not least of all the books that I picked up is Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, that famous book that turned into a movie about Atticus Finch, white lawyer, defending a black man accused of raping a white woman, in which he did not do. All right, so it's quite an enjoyable novel, and it's a really good movie as well. So either one of them see or read, you will not be disappointed. So all right, so those are all the books. And now I have no room for anything else, but we shall struggle on. We shall struggle on. Let's get to the movies. All right, so This is going rather swimmingly and quickly, so that's good. All right, so next up is Michael Douglas in Black Rain. This When I watched this in the theater, I really, really enjoyed it. But then I watched it recently, and I watched it, and I go, "Wow, this is a lot less great than I thought it was when I first watched it." Right? Maybe it was because I never really was exposed to any, uh, Japan or Tokyo or anything like that, because this takes place. Part of it is, the setting for this is in Japan, right? So, um, but I really enjoyed it at the time. But then I watched it when I was older, and it wasn't as good as I thought. But I have this, I collect Ridley Scott directed this film, and I collect his films. So I have this on DVD, but I don't have it on Blu-ray. So I found it on Blu-ray. I'll combine the two. Next up is Stephen King's Dead Zone. All right, and this is directed by David Cronenberg. It's one of the few Cronenberg films I don't have. That is one of the easier ones to find, and it basically, it's about a guy who if he touches your hand, he sees your future, right? And he ends up touching this senator's hand, and he sees that senator become president and pressing the bomb to blow the shit out of the world, like a nuclear holocaust, right? And so he goes about trying to stop that man from becoming president. All right? Next up after that is I went on Amazon and I found Shoah, The Four Sisters by Claude Lanzmann. It's a Eureka title. It's number 202 in their Masters of Cinema collection. And they had it for under $20, so I picked it up. And then I forgot I picked it up. So what did I do? I saw it again on Amazon, and what did I do? I bought it again. All right, so now I have two copies of it. Uh, Special two-disc Blu-ray edition. The Hippocratic Oath, The Merry Flea, Baluti, and Noah's Ark. Released in theaters the day before Claude Lanzmann's death in 2018, these four interviews form the final chapter of the great director's life's work and are presented here in definitive Blu-ray edition. All right, so I have two copies of it. So I got to get on my butt and have a return one. Now, one of my all-time favorite films. It's part of the Criterion collection, but there's no way I'm going to spend like $50 or $60 on a Criterion movie. I'll have to keep looking for it secondhand. But until then, I actually finally found it on a DVD. So at least I now have it in my collection. It's one of my all-time favorite films by Jim Jarmusch. It's called Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai, and it stars Forrest Whitaker. And Forrest Whitaker is an astoundingly good actor. He should be in more. He should lead in more films. I mean, you've seen him in films like over the last 30 years. You know, he was in Neil Jordan's. He was in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. He played, the football player that his younger brother and Spicoli wreck his car and blame it on the rival school. Um, he was a cop in Bloodsport. That Jean-Claude Van Damme film. He played a cop in that film. He played a burglar in David Fincher's. Um, what was the name of that film? David Fincher's Panic Room, starring Jodie Foster, and he played the main criminal that breaks into Jodie Foster's house. Uh, what else did he play? He's played so many roles, but it wasn't until okay. So then he started getting leading roles instead of side roles or smaller roles in films, and you could see, yeah, finally. So Ghost Dog was one of them. Another one was The Last King of Scotland. He played Idi Amin in that one, and that was really good as well. Um, and he also was it The Help, The Butler? What was that film where he played the butler? I can't remember. I'll put it down here. Um, so great actor, but it's like you're seeing him in all these films, but he's not the main star of the film or the main character of the film, and you're wondering when is he gonna get a lead in a movie instead of always playing these side characters, and finally he did, and it was like, see, right? So all right, so next up after that is Barefoot Contessa, and stars Humphrey Bogart and Ava Gardner. And this one I picked it up because of Mankiewicz directed it, so I don't know much about it because I haven't seen it. All right. Okay, so next up is some of the parts, Genesis, and this is basically a documentary of the band, right? So back from when Phil Collins was the drummer and Peter Gabriel was the main focus of the band. Then Gabriel Lee left, and then Phil Collins moved up to singing, and then he had his own solo career. Basically, the story of Genesis. So I picked that up. I found it for like $3. Next up is Duel in the Sun. All right, this is a Kino Lorber studio classics. And it's directed by King Vidor, who's a director that I collect, although I haven't watched many of his films yet, so I don't know a lot about him. After that is Jean-Paul Belmondo, The Body of My Enemy, which is another Kino Lorber classic, studio classic, The Body of My Enemy. All right. And then we have an Arrow Academy film. All right. It's Fellini's The Voice of the Moon. All right. So this is nice. It has the booklet. It has two Blu-ray and a DVD, I think. Yeah, a Blu-ray and a DVD. So it's a 2K restoration. So I found that for $5. So that's really good. After that is Rue de l'Estrapade. All right. French film. And then I found this film, and this film I have not seen, but it is supposed to be extremely good. All right. And it is called Mother. All right. And then we have Rio Lobo, directed by Howard Hawks, starring John Wayne. And that is no, it's not a Kino. And last but not least is I found Do the Right Thing in the Criterion. I found this for $20. So buying it new for 60 and then finding it used for 20. Yeah. It's a nice box version, Blu-ray version of it. I have it on regular Blu-ray. This is what I really enjoy most about Criterion when they do it correctly. All right. So you have it in a nice box set, but okay, it's a nice cardboard box and all that, and then you have not one, but two discs. All right. Okay. And you have a booklet, a good booklet, a good sized booklet, right, with essays and a whole bunch of other information and everything by the book. And they used to do this a lot more back in the day when they were putting out DVDs, not Blu-rays, right? Before Blu-rays came about. And a lot of their films was that way, where you had a really nice booklet to it. You had a lot of information, both written and in the extras on the DVDs. You'd have two, sometimes even three DVDs, and you pay through the teeth for the friggin' thing. But at least you know the money that you spent on it was well worth it. And they did that with Do the Right Thing. This is a really nice edition of Do the Right Thing. I have it on regular Blu-ray, so I'll just sell that Blu-ray. And I also have it on DVD. So now I have it on Blu-ray in the Criterion Collection, and till it comes out on 4K, and I have a 4K player. That'll be it for Do the Right Thing. If you have not watched Do the Right Thing, it's Spike Lee's greatest film. It's basically about a pizza joint owned by Italians in Harlem, in the black neighborhood, and all the people in the neighborhood frequently visit it, right? But one gentleman, all right, takes offense that on the wall of the pizza joint is all these Italians and there's no black people, right? I mean, you'll have like, oh, who was on it, man? It's been a while since I've seen that film. Anyways, some famous Italian men are on because it's an Italian pizza place, right? So, and then one African American guy gets offended that there is no representation of black people. It's in a black neighborhood. You should have Martin Luther King up there, or Malcolm X, or somebody like that up on the wall, along with like Sylvester Stallone or Rocky Marciano or whoever else they end up having up on the wall there, right? So, and then there, the guy says no, and then there's like this back and forth, and then anyways, it gets into it until the end. It's it's a really good film on race relations and politics as well. So if you look at it, yeah, it's easily its best film. And if you haven't seen it, you should see it. All right. So I think that is everything. I don't think there's anything else that I have here that I'm missing. Is there? No. Okay. So that's part two. I hope you enjoyed it. I tried to go through a lot of it quickly. I just concentrated on the stuff that I actually read or saw, and the stuff that I haven't, I just showed to you so that you know that those books are out there. Science is I know I can sell these books. That's the main reason why I picked up a lot of the science books from that gentleman. I have not read science a lot. All right. Science seems to be a bit dry for me. I'm more into the humanities and the social sciences, literature, philosophy, that kind of thing. But I did pick up some. I read The Origins of Species by Darwin. I read, well, I started to read Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, and then I stopped. What else in science have I read? I just simple things here or there in science, but I don't really have an education in science as much as I do as in the humanities or the social sciences and things like that. So, anyways, I know I picked these up because they're in really nice condition for $1, and if I can sell them for $7 or $8, then it's a good amount of money that I can actually maybe afford another Criterion, that kind of thing, right? So, anyways, so that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. I apologize for the length of time between videos because I went in to have throat surgery, like I said, and then I ended up right after that. I mean, like, I do not um, recommend getting throat surgery because what they do is they burn it to make it heal. So they burn the back, at least they burnt the back of my throat. So when I opened up my mouth and looked at the back of my throat, it was black, right? And then and then it turned white over time, and then it went back to the normal fleshy color of it, right? Uh, so, uh, so yeah, I lost like 20 pounds, between 15 and 20 pounds. I lost in the 3 weeks that it took for the pain to be at a tolerable level, right? So, and then right afterwards, I catch the flu or a cold. I don't know which, but it really knocked me on my ass there for a while. And but I had to work through it, so I did. But I just didn't have the energy after doing work to do this. So that's why you had that big gap of time between videos. But now I'm back at it, and look forward to my top 130 greatest films of all time. I'm still working on that. I'm up to 33 to 1. I've done the videos from 130 up to 34. Now I'm getting to the top 33 films of all time, in my opinion, and those videos will be out soon as well. So, all right, and thank you for watching. Leave a thumbs up if you liked it. Think about subscribing, and I will talk to you in my next video. All right, bye for now.